All right, hello everyone. Thank you very much for coming out and joining us today. So as Adam has said, this panel is set up as a means to discuss autonomous vehicles, but I feel we're going to veer away from it quite quickly into a broader topic about the future of mobility and what transport in general is going to look like, not only for passengers or consumers, but for companies as well in the future. So with that in mind, I'd like to start with Julian and ask you about your company, Inceptio, which is developing an autonomous trucking solution. So maybe you can, first of all, tell us a little bit about the company. And then secondly, what I'd like to know is why you went for a trucking solution rather than a passenger sort of solution, which is what we typically think of when we think of autonomous driving.
Yeah, thank you. So that is about why we start this company. So our company is called Inceptio Technology, and actually we focus on autonomous trucking. The reason is actually very practical because we see that actually there is an industry consensus that in terms of the deployment of autonomy, the trucking autonomy may be at least 3 to 5 years earlier than the passenger vehicle because in particular for the heavy-duty trucks, which is our focus, the trucks runs on highway in most of the time. And the truck is less maneuvering than the passenger vehicle. Mm-hmm. So that actually all makes the technology challenge much smaller than the passenger vehicles to start with. So that is a very practical reason there. In terms of what we do, we not only develop our autonomous technology in-house, we are also an operator of our future autonomous trucks. That means that we develop our own technology. We work with the OEM partner for them to integrate our autonomous system to the existing model of the truck. And then actually we acquire all of the trucks and we operate a nationwide truck pool, autonomous truck pool for all of the logistics customers in China. So that is what we do. The benefits, our first step is actually not aiming at the driverless truck. Mm-hmm. Our first step is that we think in about 3 years from now, we will, together with our OEM partner, we will make what we call as L3, which is highly automated, but still with a safety driver, well, with a mass production, the volume production trucks at the L3 level to be on the market. And actually, we will operate them in volume. I will explain a little bit for the L3 and what we do. That means that 99% of the time and more than 99% of the mileage, the truck will automatically run by themselves. But in the meantime, there will still be a safety driver there to stand by for any sort of extraordinary situation. That sounds a little bit dumb, but in reality, actually, it has a huge benefit. First of all, it will fundamentally improve the safety issue because if you look at today in China, every year there is a statistic which is 1 out of 1,000 heavy-duty trucks every year there will be a fatal accident. Mm. Just imagine that now everything is manual. Driver is sort of very hard to manage, but if the truck 99% of the time and mileage is automated by the machine, the safety performance will be much higher, and naturally that also goes to a always optimized fuel performance, and without going into detail, and there will also naturally lead to a much higher driver dispatching performance. So we estimate that.
Sorry if I can say, but you said. One reason for picking trucking is that it's easier to a sense because it's straighter routes, it's longer routes. So the implementation of autonomous technology is simpler there than in an urban environment. But still, it's a transitionary thing where you want to start with this 99% and then move on. Do you foresee a future where you can take the technology you're developing now and apply it to an urban or a passenger-based transport system?
That's very obvious because we see the software architecture is the same. Mm-hmm. It's just there's some of the specific requirement for the trucks. So we see technology-wise, at least 80% of the algorithm and software stack is actually, and hardware stack is actually transferable to the passenger vehicle. What is more important, actually, first as a company, that if we can take the technology on the market as early as possible, it get tested, it get the feedback, it will become much more robust. To the industry, we see that trucking will obviously be much earlier than the passenger vehicle in terms of autonomy deployment. And that actually will help the technology company, the regulator, to develop their own experience, and that kind of iteration process is actually very beneficial to the whole industry. That is the way we see the benefit here.
Absolutely. So you can implement it, you can gather data, and you can develop better systems to roll out later at a more urban level. I'd like to move on to Amit and talk to you about Shuttl, because so Shuttl is a company that provides a commuter service, an almost on-demand commuter service for employees in India. But rather than be a sort of personal private system that a lot of mobile on-demand tech is, such as Uber or even so much Lime, Shuttl runs buses. It's a communal system. And so maybe you could talk to us a little bit more about what Shuttl is and why you made this decision to go with a communal service.
Yeah. So, in India, we are obsessed with two countries, and we have been hearing about both of them, China and India. And we draw inspirations from both these countries. And, a lot of times, the companies which start out of India are mimicking solutions from which have scaled in US and now in China. And when we were starting out Shuttl, we were very impressed with what Uber has done to mobility. But the problem was that Uber solves for 5% of India. Only 5% Indians can take Uber on a daily basis to their workplace. So India needed a solution which is like at 5 cents a kilometer cost. Uber is 10 times of that in India. So how do you cater to that set of people? So that was the US part of it. And the other thing that was happening in India was that a lot of companies which got a lot of capital, they were not able to scale beyond a point because the solutions were again imported from US, and they were solving for a particular price point which people didn't have propensity to pay, so they were like a smaller market. And we said that if you have to build a China scale company in India, then you have to operate at a price point which is at a fraction of the price points that American companies or Chinese companies are used to. So, in the last session, we heard about US and China being a part of emerging technology markets. Actually, there's big delta between where China is and where India is. So even Chinese solutions have to be differently thought of. DD is like China sells 10 times the number of cars as compared to India, 30 times the number of luxury cars as compared to India, but we sell more two-wheelers than China. So if you are at a price point which is way lesser, then you have as big a business as you can build in China. Otherwise, you have a very, very thin business to build. So when you have to build a big business, you have to go with what the masses can pay for. And the only way we could operate at less than 5 cents a kilometer was to get people into bigger, more efficient vehicles. And one thing we are blessed with is number of people. And all of them are trying to make a living, and they're going to the workplaces. So, commute is something like which is very planned. Every day you are setting out pretty much at the same time. So we can build algorithms, we can build solutions, we can build routes such that we can put those people into the same buses and run a subscription service on top of it. So it's a consumer's product, but a subscription product. People are paying for themselves, and that's the only way. So you can call ourselves Uber for buses, or maybe Didi of buses, but the reality is that buses are not on demand. Buses cannot pick you from your doorstep. There is a route that you have to kind of honor. So there is some intelligence involved in that sense, but the most important thing is that we have to bring the price point to 5 cents or less. So that's the reason why we went for buses. We just couldn't import we imported the intent, but not exactly the construct of Uber and Didi.
Yeah, you mentioned it just there. I perhaps wrongfully described it as an on-demand service, where it is a subscription model, which is quite interesting and quite unique, I think, as a mobility solution. I was wondering, maybe you could talk to us a little bit more about the subscription model and whether you could see that applying to other areas, maybe subscription cars, sharing cars, or subscription line bikes, perhaps.
Yeah, so my understanding of subscription is you're asking people to pay up front for something that they will consume later. And why would people do that? They will only do it when they are very, very certain that they will have a use for that. And we are focusing on commute, which is that part of mobility which is pertaining to people going to their workplace, to their schools and colleges. And there's a lot of certainty that you will end up showing it to your workplace tomorrow, hopefully. So that can kind of ties in with the subscription part of it. And once you have that subscription thing going, then you can layer it up with other things, that's always a possibility. So that's a thought, kind of.
Yeah, I suppose it's good for business as well, because you have that certainty of income and of repeat passengers.
Yeah.
Let me move on and I've worked at narrower and narrower, from going from long distance trucking to commuting by bus down to the last mile service, which is what Lime really specializes in. What are some of the more unique challenges about the last mile that makes it such a difficult nut to crack?
Sure. So first of all, let me just briefly introduce Lime. For those who don't know, Lime is a global company provide the last mile transportation solution. By last mile, we talk about provide a solution for up to 5 miles for urban living. And our goal, the mission of the company is to make the urban living more livable. So I don't know how many people who live in Guangzhou or other mega cities. I grew up in Shanghai, and I think everyone can imagine in such a populated city, when I grew up, how long I have to stuck in traffic, and I always want to have a solution that is really suitable for the urban living. And I think everyone here will agree that adding more cars on the street will not help. Right now, based on the UN research, we know 55% of the world population living in urban area or in the cities. And that number is only going to increase. By 2050, the actual number is 68%. And I think even if the government want to build more road, there's a limitation. So when Lime come online, and I definitely believe in, is that we personalize the vehicle with more agile solution, make the city more greener and less congested. So when you talk about unique challenges, I would say, unlike Amit and Mr. Ma, our unique challenge is we operate in 120 cities around the world, 30 plus countries, 5 continents. So it's a global company, but super local, because every city have a different regulations. Some city want you to roll on sidewalk. Most of city don't want you to roll on sidewalk. Cities like Copenhagen have 89% of the road covered by the bike lane, where you can have a scooter and a bike safely travel. But in many other cities, including many cities in US, don't have that infrastructure. Some cities want you to have a virtual parking corral. Some cities want let you to park everywhere. So for every city we enter, we have to work with city, make sure that regulation and compliance is implemented, use technology solution. And we only have, it's a very young startup. We only have less than 3 years old history. So it is a challenge for us to scale and to operate in this global way.
And so what are some of the technology solutions to that problem of congesting the streets? Because I know Lime, particularly with scooters in San Francisco, has had a lot of pushback from the government and from the people, I believe, who are frustrated by the presence of these things. Here in China as well, where we've had a proliferation of on-demand bicycles and share bicycles, the government eventually steps in and try to restrict where they can be left. So what are some technology solutions to this problem of overcrowding and congestion?
Yeah, so first of all, I will say when we enter a city, we try not to overcrowd in terms of we will have estimation how many scooters or bicycles this city needs. It's not, the growth itself is not a pure goal. We want to make sure that we operate in a sustainable and efficient way. The goal is not overcrowding to just win the market. The goal is to make sure that we can provide most reliable and effective service for the user. So that's number one. So we do have, in some way, artificial limitation on ourselves to make sure it's not just overflooding the street. And secondly, depend on the city infrastructure, we will work with the city. As I said, some cities super friendly already, like Copenhagen, a lot of the European countries. But some cities don't have it. We will work with them, maybe have, for example, some city we will have a virtual parking corral. We've used technology, the GPS location, and virtually constrained some of the parking space so that the scooters will be parked in the right place instead of clogged the street.
So that works by, so if a scooter isn't parked in that area, you can't finish your ride and you're still...
Yes, if the scooter is not parking in that area, we will alert you and you cannot lock it. And a certain area you cannot operate, certain area we will let you slow down. And again, this, as I said, we are super global and super local for every city. Yeah.
Yeah, that must be a whole lot of work. Julian, talking about regulation, obviously autonomous trucking and autonomous driving is something that is still only slowly being permitted. There's lots of safety concerns associated with it. What's your experience been of working with regulators?
The China authority actually, in one way, they're very much supportive of the new technology, but when it comes to road safety, is probably the toughest in the world. Just taking a truck as an example, we've seen that there are a lot of open road tests already in the US, but actually as of today, only last month, China officially opened the first highway leg for the truck testing. Actually, for any autonomous driving testing. So the safety requirement is actually very high. We have to go through a very rigorous sort of exam process to get our truck certified and to be able to run on the highway. So this is one of the sort of facts. The beneficial part is that China is actually very aggressive in promoting the V2X infrastructure. To a way that the infrastructure will not only broadcasting all of the red lights signal, but also there will just set a lot of sensors to detect all of the passing by vehicles. So all those kind of additional detection, it will tell you how many vehicles are and obstacles are ahead and where are they, and they will feed that sort of detection data to the vehicle. So actually we can have an added layer of the sort of perception, which means that by our own sensor, and also can be by the infrastructure, which is 1 kilometers and 500 meters ahead of us. So that's something actually very interesting, and we anticipate that along most of the highway, that kind of infrastructure can be built up actually fairly quickly. There will be a major boost for the technology deployment, because that makes the autonomous driving much easier, because nowadays in most part of the world, the autonomy has to solely rely on the sensors of the vehicle itself. So that is sort of like a two-sided,
Yeah, you said V2X there, which I feel might warrant a bit of an explanation. It's vehicle to everything interconnectivity, is that right?
Yes, V2X, there is a V2V, which is a vehicle talk to the vehicle about, I'm going to take a left turn, right turn, this is my speed. This is one thing. The other is V2X. In most of the cases, it includes vehicle and the infrastructure. What we see is that in China, in particular for the highway and in the intersection, we are very optimistic that the build-up of that kind of infrastructure type of the signaling is going to be a major boost for the autonomy in China. And that actually will make the autonomous driving, the technology development much safer and much easier, because very often, for example, there is a classical challenge, technology challenge for autonomous is about reading, actually it's about reading the red light, whether it's red light, green light, and yellow light. In different circumstances, actually this is still by far the #1 challenge. But if there is, in that intersection, there is a infrastructure, they are just broadcasting which light it is. And then every vehicle, when it is approaching to this region, it reads that, and it will automatically receive that signal. So that will actually make part of the perception, which is the sort of understanding the surrounding, much easier. Same goes to not only the traffic signal, but also they will detect the passing by vehicles by the infrastructure, by the government layout infrastructure, and they are broadcasting all of these are the vehicles, the position, speed for each of the vehicles to the vehicle, to the autonomous truck or to the autonomous car. That actually make the technology itself on the specific vehicle much easier and much safer. So that is sort of a very interesting development.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's such a multi-party effort. It can't just be one company developing an autonomous car. You need the regulation in order to approve it. You need other companies to develop the other bits of tech that give center. And there can be a good back and forth between the companies and the government in this sense. And I know Lime is doing some data collection, which they're then sharing with governments to help do city planning. Is that correct? Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, totally. So first of all, with most of the cities we work with, we do have data sharing. And I want to emphasize that we only share aggregated anonymous user data. We take user privacy seriously. Why we want to share this data and why government want it? Because this is the new trend, and then most of the city government know this is a really good thing for them, but they want to understand how to plan it. And we share the data so that they know, for example, where to build bike lanes. When we see the route is mostly trafficked, but there's no bike lane, they will know this is probably the place they should plan to have a bicycle lane. They will also know where are the places very crowded, but a lot of scooter or bike want to go, and they may plan to have a parking corral so that you can park there and without really interfere with the pedestrian. So all those is really to help the city to build a better infrastructure, and again, go back to the Lime's mission, to provide a much livable urban living space.
Amit, I want to take us back to what was presented as a key topic, which was autonomous driving. And now, I know Shuttl isn't involved in autonomous driving, but we were talking earlier, and you said something about how what autonomous vehicles promise is the freedom of your own time, to be able to use your time to do something other than driving, which is something that Shuttl offers without the autonomous solution. I was wondering if you could just maybe share those thoughts with the audience.
Yeah, so one of the core things we stand for is how do we give people their time back. So most of the users who are shifting to Shuttl were either using their own vehicles, could be two-wheelers, could be four-wheelers, which they're driving, or they're moving from public transport where they would be standing most likely, and there'll be multiple changeovers involved, because of which they would again be wasting their time. And commute in our cities that we live in is a three-hour affair every day, morning and evening put together, which is like 20% of your awake time. Imagine every week, let's say on a Friday, you're just on the road, either standing or driving. There's no joy in driving during rush hours also. So, the moment you get your seat, an assured seat, you get your time back. And that's a very, very core thing on which we are building it. Kind of autonomous also solves for that, but kind of to me that case, as far as the passenger vehicles are concerned, is much stronger for cars, because there's a higher driver to passenger ratio there. In our case, there's one driver and 40 passengers, so we are not really saving something significant by kind of solving for it. There are other savings which are more societal in nature, which will go a long way, kind of, in that sense. Buses, not to the extent like to trucks, but buses also have a pattern, they follow a route. So I think buses will adopt autonomous sooner than probably maybe last mile solutions, because they go to the narrow lanes. That's my sense, but India is far from that.
Mm-hmm. I think safety is probably a benefit, because the trucks, the buses still has a major safety challenges in most of the urban environments. Mm-hmm.
You think a benefit of going autonomous would be
safety.
Safety.
Even for the bus, safety I think is going to be major benefits.
Do you think autonomous is fundamentally safer than a human-driven car or a human-driven bus?
At least in our experience with the trucks, that is obviously true, because the data now is like It's so bad, right? Every year, 1 out of 1,000 trucks in China highway, I mean the heavy-duty trucks, there will be a fatal accident, either the driver or the pedestrian. 1 out of 1,000 per year. And there are 6 million trucks running on the highway in China. So we can calculate. Yeah. And I think more and more of us are having the opportunities driving sort of gradually high level of automated functions of a vehicle. And I think we all feel that there is a very big relief of the stress. And in some of the cases, for example, if you drive the Tesla in the US highway for the commuting, you are allowed to have certain kind of relief and distraction, right? So that actually, I do not have a specific statistics, but I'm very confident that the increasing level of autonomy for a vehicle, regardless if this is a full autonomy or partial autonomy, it will definitely improve the safety performance for passenger vehicle and for the buses as well. And the other important thing I would mention is actually the fuel performance, particularly for the long-haul driving, like for the truck and also for the passenger vehicle. Now, actually, everybody has experienced that if there's a lot of hard braking, the fuel performance shoot up. But if the vehicle, both passenger one and trucks, is controlled by the machine, so the computer will automatically optimize the performance of the fuel. Basically, it is about make the torque of the engine much smoother based on all of the other external conditions, weather, road, curve, slope. And that is actually going to be a major saving and a major environmental benefits. We at the commercial vehicle side, that is very obvious. We calculate that on average for the long-haul truck driving, autonomy will on average improve the fuel performance for the diesel engine by between 7 to 15%. That's a lot of money. Absolutely. And a lot of sort of environmental impact very positively. Yeah.
Oh. So I started this talk by saying that we wouldn't really focus entirely on autonomous, but we seem to have come full circle, veered off and come back around to end on autonomy. I think it's fantastic. So a few things to look forward to there with autonomous driving would be saving the environment, saving costs, and potentially saving lives.
Yes.
So I think that's a wonderful place to end. Thank you so much for joining me on stage.
And saving time.
And thank you so much.
Thank you.